And as we begin, I'm just going to start by inviting our chairs who are present to introduce themselves so that you can hear from the wonderful folks who lead the vision of this work. So Helen, can I turn it to you, please?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Carolyn and Sonia did a great job putting this together. I want to thank them. I want to thank all of you. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Helen Bond, a university professor from Howard University, bringing in hellos from Washington, D.C. Very rainy here, but it's a pleasure to see you all. We really have an exciting hour and a half. Thank you for joining us. We've got lots of wonderful updates, and so looking forward to sharing certainly about my work with the other three co-chairs, which are here today from Diversity, Equity, and Justice, our working group for sustainable development. You'll hear more about that a little bit later. Thanks for being here and looking forward to a great discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Helen. And I think maybe we'll have so much fun. It will feel like an hour and a half, but just a slight correction that we have 2 hours,
2 hours
on our agenda today. And Gordon, welcome. And could you just introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Thank you, Carolyn, and echoing Helen, thanking you and Sonia for organizing all of this. Apologies that I'm still on the street. I'm on my way home and my camera will be on for the rest of the meeting in just a few minutes. I'm Gordon McCord, professor of economics at the School of Global Policy and Strategy at the University of California in San Diego. And I lead a center that's called the SDG Policy Initiative that bridges science to policy making for meeting the SDGs in countries across the world and also in the US. Heavily involved in SDSN USA's decarbonization work at national scale, but also local, and building other tools that we'll talk about later today on data-driven approaches to measuring and building policy around meeting the SDGs within the US. So let me stop there. I really look forward to the rest of the conversation today, and thanks so much everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Gordon. And just to quickly introduce the rest of our team who is present, I'm Caroline Fox. I'm the head of the SDSN USA network. We're hosted by the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network in New York. And you'll hear more about the network later. And I just, I have to say, looking at all the people on the call, I'm so amazed by the group that is here present. And I just look so much forward to hearing from all of you today and learning from your work on the SDGs across the country. And with that, I'll ask you, Sonia, if you can introduce yourself as well.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Sonia. I work alongside Caroline at SDSN USA. I mostly work in programs and outreach, so event planning and communications. You've probably received emails from me in the past. I'm Washington, D.C. based at the moment, but I do work remotely from the NYC office. And I also do communications for the global SDSN. So later on in the program, if you have any questions about our global networks, which are, national and regional, I'm happy to answer questions about that as well. But great to see all of these familiar faces.
So I think given that we are still waiting for 2 of our chairs to join us, why don't we move to a quick round of speed networking now? Sonia, if you'd be willing to introduce us, I can set it up on the back end.
Absolutely. So we've started to implement a speed networking at several of our virtual networking meetings. We're going to set up breakout rooms with 2 to 3, 3 to 4 folks so that you can get to know a few of the people on this call a little bit more personally. And it's just going to be a little bit of time in the room to introduce yourself, talk about your organization and your background, and try and make connections about your sustainable development work in a couple of minutes that we give. I think we're going to give around 5 minutes for this session. So if you do end up in a room that is empty for any reason, for some technical Zoom reason, we ask you just to hold tight. We will make sure somebody arrives in your room. Sometimes there's just a bit of a delay in people accepting the breakout room invite. So I just wanted to give that little disclaimer. If you do have any problems with your breakout rooms, you can come back to this main meeting. Just try not to leave the meeting, try to just return to the main room if possible. And we appreciate your patience if there are any difficulties, but hopefully it will go off without a hitch. hopefully we gave you a little bit more warning and didn't cut you off mid-sentence. But I know it's not a lot of time to close your thoughts. So if you do want to leave anything in the chat in terms of contact information for other members, we totally appreciate that. It's a great way to stay connected with those that you met in your rooms. And hopefully there will be plenty of time this meeting for other points of discussion and to revisit some of the points that were made in breakouts. So we do hope that you stay on and we can continue to have these conversations, but this was a great way to do some beginning introductions.
I have word that Jeff, our final co-chair, is trying to join the meeting. So I am going to give just a few more seconds in hopes that he is able to join us now. And just please continue putting your information into the chat as we get going here. Here we go. Jeff, are you with us?
I am now. Thank you for letting me in.
You joined at a wonderful time. We have just had introductions from the other co-chairs, and then we did 2 rounds of speed networking. So everyone on the call has had a chance to start to get to know each other and begin the conversation. So I'd love to just invite you to now introduce yourself. Sorry to put you on the spot as you're joining. I can't see your camera though.
No?
Oh, there you are.
I can see them.
Must have just been me. I see you now. So I'd love to just welcome you and ask you to introduce yourself and give some, opening thoughts and context to where things are with the network.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Caroline. And sorry for joining late, but I needed to register. And fortunately, I was allowed to register. So I'm happy to be in the system. I'm Jeff Sachs and lucky to be president of the Global Sustainable Development Solutions Network and university professor at Columbia University. We are in an extraordinarily difficult time nationally and globally, and the Sustainable Development Goals they are on the one hand just about the only globally agreed framework for almost anything in the world today. On the other hand, they're absolutely struggling for survival. So I'm just finishing an 8-country trip. I got home yesterday and discussed the SDGs in Germany, Greece, Egypt, Malaysia, Argentina, and Democratic Republic of Congo in the last 6 weeks. And the good news is that all of those countries have the SDGs in the center of their agenda. The bad news is that at least in the developing countries, just keeping one's head above a rising water level is a huge challenge, because it was hard enough already in 2019 to be a developing country with little access to the financing needed to achieve sustainable development. Then COVID, of course, wreaked havoc worldwide. And now the war and the sanctions in the Ukraine crisis are also causing a lot of devastation. So at the global level, the UN is working very hard, and I was on the 3rd of 3 long calls in the last few days with UN leadership on the question of how to finance and propel the SDG agenda in the midst of geopolitical turmoil and financial difficulties and disruptions of supply chains and the world economy. And I'm co-chairing a task force for the Secretary General on these financing issues, because so much of the SDG agenda is about finance. The other side is policy to direct the finance to the right issues. The situation in the United States is complicated, not because of our poverty, but because of our internal divisions and the lack of national level consensus on anything. The SDGs in the United States have a life in universities and at the city and metropolitan level, but almost no life at all at the federal level. And I would say at the federal level, it's not only that the SDGs as a category of objectives is failing, but also the specific agenda of sustainable development, such as the energy transition, is obviously politically blocked almost entirely in Washington. I see no progress, and I see no sign of progress of any coherent federal policy on most of the SDG issues. Last year at this time, we were hoping that with the new administration, our work as a network on issues like the energy transformation would feed into a coherent federal effort on these issues. And we produced a zero carbon action plan as part of the SDSN network in late 2020 to be ready for the new administration. We had several good conversations with senior officials in early 2021 with the White House and the Department of Energy and State Department and others about the ZCAP, the Zero Carbon Action Plan. I may be completely wrong, but my impression is that any such organized effort by the US government to have a federal program on decarbonization is lost right now. The Build Back Better legislation probably will not see the light of day. Senator Manchin, who is the chairman of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee and an owner of 2 coal companies, is not very interested in this agenda. The Republican Party is, as far as I can see, lined up almost entirely at the congressional level against any such agenda. So I don't see things happening at the Washington level. This raises big questions for us as our network about what to do. And we have a leadership council for SDSN USA, as we have for other national chapters of the global effort. And I think one of the takeaways for me in our leadership council meetings is our need to support local, city-based, state-based, corporate, and university activities across the country, and not to bemoan or be completely stymied by the Washington divisions. And I'd be grateful for us to have a discussion about that. There's a lot of interesting developments in any of our areas, environment, social policy, and so forth, at city and state levels. We have an active network of mayors and connections with local officials across the country that is always very inspiring when we speak with the local officials, because they're moving forward with many initiatives despite the paralysis in Washington. Also, of course, American universities, people on the line are strongly interconnected with other countries and with global initiatives as well. So there's a lot of leadership in the US universities on all of the sustainable development goal issues. So I hope that in our discussion, we can get some sense from around the virtual room of areas where initiatives would be most valuable, could be leveraged, could do a lot of good, on areas where us being together in a national network can make a difference for individual participants, and areas where the fact that we have a global network of 1,500 universities that really stretches across about 140 countries and in almost all of the world, and certainly in every global region that is active, could also facilitate your work and make new connections for your activities nationally and globally. So I'm excited for the conversation. That's just a brief introduction. It's a weird time and so many cross currents, but I think the one absolutely key point that I have found in the 8 weeks of travel that I just completed, and which took me, as I said, to Africa, Asia, Europe, and Latin America, is the SDGs conceptually are not only alive and well, they are the only game in town for governments, for most governments in the world, trying to figure out a path forward, as difficult as this period is. So that's a brief intro, and I'll pass it back to you, Caroline.
Thank you, Jeff. And you've definitely outlined the complex problem for us to try and think through today. But I think that, you know, we have a huge representation here of some of the most active folks in our network. And I already see some ideas coming through on chat. Dan, maybe I'd like to ask you if you have a few thoughts and follow up before we open up further.
You know, I think I said earlier, I think we all have to redouble our efforts, because it is clear that the process of moving towards the sustainable future is not one that this administration or even perhaps this decade will deliver. And it does mean that the university opportunity to engage a younger generation and launch a whole new set of leaders that can carry this agenda forward is fundamental to success. And I have been exchanging chat messages with a number of you. It's a joy to see how many people are moving the agenda in their own way, in their own institutions, and doing so in a way that has real impact. And I echo what others have said, that the state and local and other connections are where real traction is being found. I say that as someone who's been a state level commissioner and frankly was able to get a lot done. Connecticut launched a green bank when I was the commissioner. So I do think no one should despair. There is really no time for that, but it is a moment to stop and reflect on where each of you can drive the agenda forward. And obviously within our home institutions is place one, but I am thrilled to see a number of you are placing students with mayors, with governors, with environmental advocacy groups, with those that are thinking about the economics of the Sustainable Development Goals. All of that makes great sense to me. So I'm also glad to have the chance to salute some of you who are perhaps struggling in political climates that are not as conducive as Connecticut to advancing the agenda. And I say, stay at it. You're doing the Lord's work, and we all need every bit of effort across the entire spectrum of the country. We really, and frankly, the world. We cannot fall back and say some places are too hard, some issues are too hard.
Dan, could I ask you, could you just say one specific word about the Green Bank and how it continues to function, and whether you'd recommend that as an initiative for other states? Because this question of SDG financing is really central, and I really like the idea. And if you've proven a success, is it a model that we could actually promote across the country?
It really is, Jeff. So 7 or 8 other states have now set up green banks. A number of counties are even doing it, and cities have started. So the idea is pretty simple one, which is to, rather than have a big budget for clean energy go to direct consumer subsidies, it's used to de-risk private capital and to really engage almost always regional banks, by the way. This is not something the big money center banks do, because they want to put money out in $400 million blocks. And this is $4,000 blocks or $40,000. But we have found that there's a big appetite, and particularly where you have a public-private partnership and a public entity, and the Connecticut Green Bank, it was such an entity, could de-risk the flow of private capital. And it allowed each dollar of state money, really ratepayer money, because it was being funded by a service benefit charge that Connecticut ratepayers paid, and by funding from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, the RGGI initiative. And that flow of funds allowed Connecticut to ramp up by 7-fold the number of energy efficiency projects at the household scale, at the corporate scale, and special programs for low-income communities, which had been overlooked in many cases. And also to do expanded wind power, solar power, et cetera. So it really provided a 7-fold leverage on limited public resources.
Wow.
That has translated into something like now $1 billion worth of projects in the small state of Connecticut. So I do think there is an opportunity here. And I would tell you, as someone who's spent now 35 years studying what works and what doesn't in driving the sustainability agenda, in advancing environmental protection and a clean energy future, my number one conclusion is that the 20th century approach made a number of mistakes, but none bigger than failing to ask where the money would come from to get done what we need to do. And so that's why I think there is a real value in being creative about flowing resources to all the work that we know needs to be done.
It could be a central theme for us because it is so core, and it's a proven model, and it's something that could be greatly multiplied.
And I would say the other thing that is doable, and this I say particularly knowing that we've got folks from all across the country, including what I would say the tougher states to make progress, it's an agenda that can be structured in a way that Republicans as well as Democrats like it. So the vote in the Connecticut legislature to approve the Green Bank got all 36 senators, every Republican as well as every Democrat, to vote in favor. And out of 151 representatives, 5, all Republicans voted no, but the overwhelming majority of the Republicans voted yes. And by the way, of those 5 Republicans that voted no, several came to me in the months later and said, well, I meant to vote yes. I got confused. I didn't know what button to press. It was late at night. So once something proves a success, everybody wants to be part of it. And this, again, I would say can be structured in a way that has broad bipartisan support. I've given up hope, as Jeff was signaling he has maybe as well, on the federal government getting its act together on much of this. There was, just so you know, as part of the Build Back Better agenda, a proposal to do something similar at the federal scale, but I don't see it moving ahead. So I think state, local, issue specific in some cases, green banks, and by the way, there's lots of different names, is an initiative worth putting some muscle behind.
Excellent. Excellent, really excellent.
Oh, thank you. And I'll just mention as well that this has come up on a number of our recent networking meetings that we've had monthly. I think that there's interest in some knowledge within the network to consider around SDG financing, and it's a topic I think others would be keen to take up. So I suggest we add that to our action points for this meeting. And also folks are welcome to put examples in the chat and ideas in the chat that we can follow up with as well. I might take just a minute to go share a couple of slides here about some information that we gathered from focal points from the network and sort of where we stand on the SDGs in the US to give a little bit of context, and then we'll open up for more discussion with the group. So this is a map that shows US delivery on the SDGs from the US Sustainable Development Report that was released last fall. This is an SDSN state level index assessing SDG progress. And a green state would indicate that they were on track. So currently we have no states on track to achieve the SDGs. We have no less than half of the indicators. There's 103 indicators that we assess for this report, and less than half of them are on track or even improving at all towards the SDGs. And when we put this in a global context, we see that when looking at specific indicators, US states are also often behind OECD country averages. This example is for maternal mortality. So last fall, we took a member survey of to all of the focal points of SDSN USA's 173 now members. And we learned a lot from you about what your institutions are doing, what you think as opportunities, and where you see this network as being able to add value. So just to give some overall context to our conversation, I'll share a few findings from that survey here. Just less than half of our members reported that their institution has made any kind of public commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals or this agenda. But over 70% said that they are working on SDG related curriculum materials. And they identified a number of common institutional barriers. The majority of people put in something about time and awareness, as well as the challenge that we hear articulated so often of breaking down silos in the academic system and communicating across disciplines and across campus. When asked about challenges to achieving the SDGs in the United States, many of the responses centered on the lack of public awareness, a lack of resources, the political context that we've already started talking about, but I think filters into almost every conversation that we have these days on these issues, and a lack of coordination, particularly at the national scale, but also within institutions, as just mentioned. When we asked about what do we think our network specifically could contribute to, there were respondents answering for every SDG, which I think is good news. We had the most folks responded that we could make a difference on quality education, climate action, and sustainable cities. And these are all areas that we've engaged in as a network before. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to grow and expand our work in those areas. So we'll get a little bit more into our current initiatives because I think that the leaders of our various initiatives are on the line. So I'd like to turn it to them in just a moment. But just wanted to flag that we have initiatives going on in all of these areas. A part of the reason for us gathering today is to create a moment where we can talk across initiatives, because I think many of you are engaging with us in one particular area or in our monthly meetings, but we don't often have kind of a forced reason to share across these. So I'm really grateful for this, for everyone coming today to share your work. And just a brief note on some, I think, I'll skip past this and just go on to some of our priorities for the coming year are to increase and empower our engaged membership, to strengthen the connection of our initiatives to policy and outcomes, as we've started talking about already. Think about if there are ways we can encourage national leadership on the SDGs, and also build our focus on the areas where it is working well at the local and municipal levels. We also want to increase the visibility of this network and build our internal capacity to be able to more strongly support you in these initiatives. So, I think today we we're here to think about our shared vision, we're here to share knowledge, and we're here to build trust. I think the foundation of work is people, and the people that contribute to this network are the foundation of what's going to allow us to have things happen. So I invite you to come forward with an open mind, and that's what we're here to do. So one more thought is that when asked what one solution SDSN could best contribute to SDG achievement over the next year, this is a word map of the responses with, again, focus on partnerships, climate action, and quality education. So along with the finance ideas just raised and the other things mentioned, I'd like us to just keep these things in mind. As many of you probably submitted the responses. So just so you know, this is where we all are together. And then one more thing is, I think we'll put this link in the chat, but there's a lot of folks in the line and we probably won't get to hear all of the ideas that you have during the event. So I encourage you to post stickies on this Jamboard, share your ideas, things for us to follow up on, any questions, etc. And with that, I am going to try and stop sharing my screen, if I can figure out how to do that. And I think we can now end the presentation moment, and we'll open up the floor for some discussion. If you could just, since we have so many folks in the line, if you have a reflection on this or on what was previously said, just raise your hand and we'll call on you. Jeff, I see you've unmuted. Perhaps you want to start off.
Caroline, I was just wondering whether people will talk about those specific research areas, because I think a short summary of each of those would be very helpful if that's possible.
Absolutely. And I think we have our working group chairs on the line. So perhaps I can start by putting the Zero Hunger Working Group chairs on the spot. I believe all three of you are on. We have Asma Latif, Basil Daher, and Alicia Powers, who have been leading this work for about 2 years now, believe it or not. Might one of you or all of you want to introduce yourselves and just give a brief update?
I can kick it off and then hand it over to Alicia and Basil. My name is Asma Latif, and I work with the SDG2 Advocacy Hub, which is a global initiative to foster greater coordination, collaboration around the Zero Hunger goal of the SDGs. So as Caroline said, for the last 2 years, I've been working very closely with Caroline and Alicia and Basil Daher to honor the Zero Hunger Pathways project. And that the goal of that project is to really think through the pathways to achieve zero hunger in the United States by 2030 in ways that would build resilience, enhance equity, improve diets, and contribute to sustainability. And we've been doing that through a series of dialogues over the last year and a half on different topics, including in partnership with the Diversity, Equity, and Justice Working Group to look at the equity issues around these issues. And so, you know, I think Minerva put in the chat that the White House is hosting a hunger summit in September. It was announced earlier this week. Representative McGovern has put money in the budget for this summit. And so it's an exciting opportunity for us to put forward some of the outcomes of our dialogue and also to think with you how best we could use that opportunities. Alicia, Basil, please add.
Thank you, Asma. My name is Basil Daher, and I'm a research scientist at Texas A&M University, and I've been co-chairing this Zero Hunger Pathways project together with Asma and Alicia for the past couple of years. One cornerstone, I would say, of our working group has been to really build on the research and the evidence and to translate that into policy making. So we're trying to, through the dialogues that Asma mentioned and through the work that we've been doing and the report that we're currently working on, is to really provide evidence-based policy recommendations for the short term, things that we could do in the shorter term, but also how we could chart a longer term vision for a food system that is more sustainable, more resilient, more equitable, that recognizes the inherent interconnectedness of the food system with other systems that are interconnected with it, and recognizing that we cannot develop strategies for making that food system more resilient and more sustainable without recognizing the need to cooperate across different sectors and across different decision-making entities across these sectors. So we're building on the existing research that exists out there and making recommendations toward ways and mechanisms we could better develop such integrative decision-making approaches in order to address hunger in the US.
Yeah, and I'll end with an invitation to you all, but also for you to extend an invitation to any colleagues that may have direct or indirect connections to SDG2 or hunger, particularly in the areas of equity, health, sustainability, and I'm forgetting our last one, resilience. We will be hosting another dialogue on May 23rd and do host dialogues periodically throughout the year. So please pass along the invitations that you receive in your inbox to any colleagues that may be able to contribute to these conversations. And as Basil alluded to, we are anxious to release a report on what has been happening as a result of these dialogues and to really stimulate policy recommendations and now participate in the White House conference, which will be having listening sessions until September. And then there will be an in-person component in DC in September. So please, if you have colleagues or if you yourself have any direct or indirect work associated with hunger, we welcome you to come to the dialogues and contribute to that report.
Thank you all so much. And I see some chats coming through, but please feel free to post ideas on that or our suggestions or comments for that group. And I just say it's been a real pleasure working with all of you on this and through the path of all of the dialogues, watching the community of people engaging on that work grow. And I'm really excited for the report to come out and for us to work to connect that to policy. And I think that's one of the key challenges that we need to focus on as a network this year. So perhaps I can turn to Elena Crete, my colleague at SDSN, and ask you to give a brief comment on the ZCAP and climate and energy work.
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everyone. It's been a great discussion so far. Really excited to be here today. So Jeff mentioned earlier the Zero Carbon Action Plan, and I put a link to it in the chat. We published this a few years ago to really figure out nationally, how do we get to net zero by mid-century, not only from a technology and infrastructure perspective, but also how do we finance it, how much is it going to cost, and what policies do we really need to push at the federal level to get there. So since publishing that work, we've been really trying to think more locally. So how could this kind of exercise be downscaled? I believe Gordon might actually talk a little bit more about our regional decarbonization framework project that we have ongoing right now with the San Diego County. You all might have also heard that in previous meetings. But basically a similar exercise looking at not only the infrastructure needed, but how does that impact the local economies, what policy and financing needs to be leveraged at a regional scale to enable that, and what does that actually look like in a next year sense, in the next 5 years, next 10 years. So we've been working intensively with them on that project. And actually really excitingly and relevant for this group is we also have a guidebook that is going to come out of that later this summer. So we're basically trying to extract the key methodology, tools, basically everything that could be replicated in different jurisdictions and putting into a really easy to use guide so that we can try to redo this exercise across the US with different counties that might be at different starting points as well. And in that exercise, we are opening it up. We've actually shared it with our Zero Carbon Consortium last month, trying to collect examples or other tools. We know universities are always thinking about this and working on this and publishing these kind of open source resources, but accessing them or knowing about them sometimes is a barrier. So we're hoping that we can use this guidebook to really shed some light on all of the work that you all work on. So if you do have any relevant exercises relevant to that or want to have a conversation about that, I'm happy to chat. And I'll also just mention, I also lead our COP engagement at a global level for our network globally. So we're going to be thinking more about how to engage our universities. Last year, we worked really closely with Emory College on our Zero Emission Solutions Conference alongside COP. So there'll be another opportunity for all of you to engage in that as well in the coming months. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena.
Is Gordon there to elaborate?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, Gordon.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. So just, I think, in the spirit of localization of some of these national level exercises that where SDSN USA has been a leader, what we did here in the County of San Diego with the support of the county government is to take what we do at national scale, which is a science-based view of decarbonization by 2050 and laying out pathways in the energy system, the transportation system, the buildings, et cetera, all articulated at national scale, but bringing it down to the local scale, where here local means the geographic area of the San Diego region that includes 18 jurisdictions, to help them align on their individual climate policies under a unified vision that's driven by science on where the region needs to go by 2050. And a lot of the political rubber will hit the road when you're talking about a very geospatially explicit plan for decarbonization. Where are you going to put all of that utility scale solar and wind power? What agriculture are you going to take offline? What ecosystems are you going to compromise with all of that infrastructure? There's some really difficult decisions that we need to make as a society that are very hard to talk about at national scale. And in fact, they all fall down to local jurisdictions in terms of land use decisions, urban expansion, the transportation system, et cetera. And so that's been a place where we can make a lot of progress as a network. As Elena said, we're writing a guidebook that abstracts from our work here in Southern California with the idea that any other jurisdiction across the country could pick it up and hit the ground running and adapt the exercise, ideally local universities in partnership with local government, so that you get a science-first vision that informs policymaking by local government on the very difficult decarbonization questions at local level. So happy to talk more about that offline. Well, I see Elena has shared the link, but we'd be happy to support any other part of the country in doing a similar exercise.
Gordon, it's incredible work. Can I just ask you, was it natural for the county to take it at the county level, because it's such an interesting level of aggregation? Does that work naturally, or was that a stretch, or how did that come about?
I think, well, at least in California, the county does have broad mandates around land use and general planning, and understood that the coordination in the transportation system, the land use system, would really fall at a regional scale. They don't exactly, and also a lot of the smaller jurisdictions copy county codes on housing, for example, reach codes on buildings, and even if there's not direct jurisdiction by the county, a lot of the smaller local jurisdictions just take county codes and downscale them to the local jurisdiction. So the county had the foresight of understanding that, thinking about decarbonization for the San Diego region, that the county would have a very important coordinating role to play, and had the wherewithal financially to bring together all of the science to inform the region. And so it's been very it's been interesting. Now they have to figure out politically what's the cross-cutting mechanism that gets coordination across these 18 jurisdictions under a unified scientific vision. That's what we're advising them on now. But this is hard. I think in a federated system like ours, to get system level change involves a lot of local coordination of jurisdictions.
It's an incredible project, and really one that could be taken up elsewhere, as you say. Actually, I wanted to ask you one more thing. Gordon is a great expert on GIS use. Are GIS tools critical for what you're doing, helpful, or how would you put it in the context of the planning?
Absolutely. This is the greatest differentiator between the national scale work and the local work. So just like the national scale work, there are energy models in the background. In fact, it's the same team. It's the Williamson-Jones team family of models. But when you get down locally and you're talking about where are we going to put all this infrastructure, it's all GIS-based models that say, okay, if I want to produce this much wind and this much solar, and I've got layers telling me what are the biodiversity richness areas, what are the ecosystem sensitivity areas, where are the protected state parks that we can't build on, it becomes a geospatial optimization question, and we have all those tools ready to go for anywhere in the US.
But that is incredible, and really an incredible resource. And Jack Dangermond and Esri, which is the creator and host of ArcGIS, was praising you, Gordon, for your work just on a call a couple of days ago. But I think promoting also GIS capabilities in our educational training and then using those in these practical programs, to my mind, is a great breakthrough. So anything we can do to support you to do that, you should count on that.
Absolutely. And also a call to the network to tell us how to make all this as useful to you as possible. So we've written this guidebook. We're putting out tutorials on doing things. But if you come to us and say, I want to be in your first set of guinea pigs to actually do this elsewhere, we would be delighted, because it helps us design these tools in the most useful ways for all of you.
Phenomenal. Wow.
Thank you. And I see a ton of ideas and different initiatives being mentioned in the chat throughout this conversation. So we're tracking all of that. Feel free to keep putting more in. And if you're interested to involve on the work that Gordon just mentioned specifically, let us know and we'll make sure to follow up on that connection. And thank you, Gordon and Elena, for outlining that. I think one of the great opportunities that we should build towards as a network is to think about how we can leverage the number of communities that we're in to scale the network. We now have 173 members across almost all of the US states. And we see that, each of these, I think about 80% of our members are universities. These are living laboratories, deeply engaged in communities, and kind of ground zero for where a lot of this research can meet action. So please do get in touch with us as you take this on. With that, I think I will ask Helen if you would share a bit of information about the Diversity, Equity, and Justice for Sustainable Development Working Group.
Thank you, Carolyn. I will be happy to do so. I think Deepa Vivekis is here and maybe Victor Udu, I'm not for sure. But I want to say that the working group was established in June 2021 for the purpose of really, supporting the SDGs in combating racial and ethnic discrimination and inequality, which we understand and see as a stymie to really sustainable development. Also, the Diversity and Equity Justice Working Group, we promote sustainability and, of course, the Paris Climate Agreement, as well as it's built on the Leave No One Behind principle. I want to specifically mention some work that we've been doing with the Poor People's Campaign. I believe Shelly Barnes is on. I want to give her a shout out if she is. I can't see all the screens at once. But the Poor People's Campaign will be holding a mass Poor People and Low Wage Workers March, a moral march on Washington, June 18th. And SDSN has been working to support them by providing data, looking at the impact of COVID-19 specifically on poor people. We produced a report titled A Poor People's Pandemic Report, mapping the intersections of poverty, race, and COVID-19. And so that is up on their website. And so I'd like to say, if you're tired of meeting and you want to march, join us on June 18th in Washington, where we plan to get together and look at around no poverty and those kinds of issues. We see that as a real stymie to sustainable development. Also on June the 1st, we're having a DEJ wider network meeting where Reverend Liz is going to be there to speak about the Poor People's Campaign and the march, as well as Shally Barnes. And we're hoping people, because the Poor People's Campaign is organized across the United States. So that will primarily be our focus on June the 1st, although I've been working with, and I really apologize, I really failed to introduce my co-chairs. Hopefully you can spot them. I did mention Deepa and Victor, but I didn't mention Claudia Roma Edelman. We've been working together. She's developed a Hispanic activation toolkit where we plan to introduce part of that on June the 1st as well. I'm going to let Deepa talk about in terms of responsive philanthropy. I'm going to let Deepa talk about her work with the Cleveland Foundation. I'll briefly mention our work with the Association of Black Foundation Executives, ABFE. They actually asked me to speak at their Harambee conference about a couple weeks ago, but I was actually speaking somewhere else. They have an initiative that we hopefully want to inform by talking to them about aligning their work with the SDGs. That's called Responsive Philanthropy on Black Communities, to support the kind of grant making and donor priorities that support the dignity and human rights of those communities. One of the things that DOJ focuses on is supporting funding for SDGs and awareness in those communities. I'm going to hand it over to Deepa to talk about, she's been doing fantastic work with the Cleveland Foundation, and so I'm going to let her tell you about that. Deepa, if you would.
Thank you, Helen. Truly appreciate it and pleasure to be here today. I would like to start off, by briefly sharing about the 6 goals that the working group has, which kind of, is to build awareness of the SDGs at the local government level and collecting disaggregated data and providing an opportunity for more in-depth and providing those intersectionality that was mentioned, where currently the local level data is not very much available, especially the level of detail that kind of shows or makes the inequalities visible, and also coming up with strategies on how SDGs can actually help towards informing policymaking. And also one of the other goals is increasing awareness in communities of color and some of the disinvested communities within cities and the states, also localizing SDGs within communities that are farthest behind, and utilizing the lens of SDGs in intersecting various forms of oppression. So in this, with this goals as our framework, some of the work that I'll be sharing today from the Cleveland Foundation kind of touches upon the building awareness within the local level, and also increasing awareness and localizing the SDGs into our work. So Cleveland Foundation is the world's first community foundation that was formed in 1914. And our work is geographically focused across 3 communities within Cleveland region, Ohio, and 3 counties. And we serve about 2 million people. Annually, our giving is about $100 to $120 million. And currently, with the network support, we have had multiple conversation on providing the conversation around the relevance of aligning our hyperlocal efforts within the community, and the reason as to why the importance of aligning our work in the global scale and using SDGs as our framework was brought forward into our leadership level. And as of this year, very happy and excited to share that we are currently aligning all our programmatic efforts and our social impact investment to SDGs. And one of the early adopters, I would say for sure, within the foundation space to do this level of engagement and alignment. And we are now involved in multiple learning cohorts and helping and kind of providing peer support for other foundations. Back to you, Helen. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepa. Deepa's doing such rich work we've had. And a part of that group that we didn't mention, we have Judith Adu and Hilde Apoko, who works between Ghana and Norway. Ghana has formally adopted the SDGs at a national level. And they've actually met with the Cleveland Foundation and they were extremely impressed. And so our hopes is to bring ABFI, the Association of Black Foundation Executives, into this conversation. And so we're seeing it as a very rich space. Also, the DEJ, we submitted an abstract. We hope to build a paper. I know Deepa is going to be focusing around collaboration SDGs in this, but we've submitted to talk about the Amplifying All Voices for Children and Youth, the title of our paper that we're going to be working on, and maybe building some dialogues around is the realization of child rights and the SDGs. My PhD is in human development. I teach a lot of child development, adolescent development. So this is an area of great concern for me and for us. Looking at the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the CRC, and the SDGs, we see them as mutually reinforcing and mutually beneficial. So we're looking at following up on that. I'm just looking at my list to make sure I didn't forget anything. And we'll also be highlighting Claudia's Hispanic Activation Toolkit, which is a fantastic piece of work that we want to highlight. So that's what we're doing. Any input, please join us on June the 1st. So we think we have our strategy together and where we're going to go and what we're going to do. And so we do look for your input and we invite your comments. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Helen and Deepa. It's been exciting to see that work growing, and I look forward for more to come. I think it's, a central agenda for all of the work that we do, and it's at the core of every project. And you've been involved in all of the different working groups that we have, and I think that's evidence of it. So thank you for the way that you're taking this on and making sure to connect it with our other initiatives as well. I think that Radhika may have a conflict coming, so I'm going to just turn to her now to introduce something that I'm really excited to share, which is a new initiative for SDSN USA. And Radhika, are you able to?
Yes, Caroline, I'm here.
Great.
Thank you for making SDSN USA such a big part of SDGs and also focusing on the SDGs at the local level. I hear from the survey that climate education is a big part of what folks are interested in. So here is very good news. We've been working on Mission 4.7, and I'll send the link here in the chat itself. So it's Mission 4point7.org. We are partnering with UNESCO, SDSN. We also have a Ban Ki-moon Center and Pope's Pontifical Academy also included in what we are trying to do, focusing on SDG 4.7, which is essentially global citizenship education, as well as education for sustainable development. And as most of you have mentioned, that climate education has really not come to the forefront. And here is what we are trying to do with SDSN USA, create a local US chapter of Mission 4.7, which is a global entity. We are doing a lot of international work in India and Ghana, elsewhere. But clearly in the US, we really need to focus on many aspects of SDG 4.7 or transformative education, as we call it, which is such a pity because I feel that US should be leading education efforts across the globe. But we are focusing now with a lot of SDG USA partners here on transformative education, bringing all the different resources together, creating case studies. So if your state or your county is doing a wonderful job of education in terms of climate education or global citizenship education. We want to hear from you, create case studies, share across different entities, share across different units, maybe with the local governments, get the mayors involved. So there's a big advocacy component of what we are doing. And there is also a very technical component where we really need to share resources that are free, curate lesson plans, work on various different SDGs, how to bring them together, create resources that are frameworks that could be used by teachers, students. Students are co-creating lesson plans. So we have a space where the youth can also be a part of our thematic work plans. And I've been working with Caroline, and she's given us this space where on June 13th, we will be launching our first meeting. So we are inviting everyone to be a part of it. We will send out, I'm sure Caroline will send out more information on the meeting itself, but we have different thematic areas: teacher professional development, creating materials together, creating these case studies, sharing across different platforms, sharing different ideas, even if it is a framework or even if it is policy advocacy work that you are doing to focus on SDG 4.7 for K to 12. Especially, I think it will be a great venture where all of us could partner. And I want to really invite this group who are focusing on energy. There is a lot of discussion on education, on financing, SDG financing. Can we translate all of that into lesson plans that we can do locally, get reactions from teachers, and build up a community that is not only just focusing on theories and frameworks on how it will be done, but is actually right now doing it. It's like a community of practice, and how we can share those ideas across different schools. With the pandemic, we know now that there is like a global classroom that we are working on. There can be so many different students cross-pollinating ideas. We can have so many different activities that can happen at the same time, where we can share. Students can share ideas, teachers can share ideas. So here is a request that if you can participate in our next meeting, which will be the launch, we will have different thematic areas. If you want to be a part of the thematic area or anything that you are very passionate about, please join our meeting. And I'm sure it will be a great looking at all the different thematic areas. We have a long reach there, and I think we'll be able to learn from the different networks that are already there. And maybe the next march will be to the White House on transformative education, and hopefully we'll get a lot of work done on the advocacy as well as the practice component. So welcome everybody, and hope to have you all there on June 13th when we have our launch.
Radhika, thank you so much. Your work is amazing, and we see it actually also in New Jersey and in New York City, the practical results. And one of the core ideas is not only the formal or technical education about sustainable development, but experiential learning for young people. And I do think high school students certainly should be doing projects about how their communities can achieve sustainability or energy transformation and so forth, and the discussing with the mayor or the city council or county commission on these issues. So finding ways to expand the curriculum for creative experiential learning, to my mind, is just a phenomenal opportunity. That's what Radhika is working on. And I see in the chat stream lots of people interested or working on that. So please join, and let's really try to promote this. We also have work on, of course, a lot of our work on university level curricula and sharing of university level curricula through the SDG Academy. And this is another area as a network where I think we can develop new training programs, new teaching, new online modules, new certificates, and so forth in this area. By the way, the chat stream is amazing. So keep just sharing ideas, your initiatives, areas of support, questions, thoughts about what SDSN should be doing. But it's an incredible resource, all the things being posted.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Radhika. I think that the focal point survey information I shared earlier showed how strongly network members are saying that we can make a difference on education. So I think that, this is just the start of what we can launch and what we can envision together. And I think it will grow. So I really look forward to and encourage everyone who's able to join on June 13th. That will be a networking meeting. So it'll be a lot of open discussion and breakout rooms and a real chance for us to dig in and talk to each other about this agenda and quality education ambitions for SDG 4. So we have one more initiative, and then I'm going to let everyone take a quick break to stretch legs, and then we'll come back for the rest of the call. But I just want to turn to Sonia and ask her to give a brief update on SDSN Youth USA, which launched last fall and is still getting off the ground.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. Unfortunately, Brighton from the Global SDSN Youth wasn't able to join, but that's also a really interesting program that I advise everyone to check out and see what kind of different programming is being implemented across the world in terms of mobilizing youth. But here in the USA, as Caroline just mentioned, we have 3 really fabulous coordinators from US-based schools who are just kind of starting out to try and mobilize youth and create student hubs across the US. So far, they've held a film screening. They have a podcast that releases podcasts with really interesting interviews just about every month. And they are also trying to collaborate on a global blog to bring in the thoughts and the information from other youth just across the world. But they are looking for more youth to get involved. So if you have youth interested in the SDGs at your university, please direct them to us. We'd love to introduce them to the coordinators. I think there's a lot of opportunity for this program to expand, and we are happy to answer any questions or make those connections.
Thank you, Sonia. And I see some more things coming through the chat, including David Blockstein's note that next year there will be another worldwide teach-in on climate and justice. And just want to say that it's been really fun to watch that initiative grow. And I think I'd love to also think about if there are lessons from that around the curriculum side that we could incorporate into our education initiatives. That model has schools across the globe on the same day doing a local action and teach-in on climate and justice. So I think we've done an overview of our initiatives overall, and I think we have kept everyone seated for a while. So I'd love to just take a few minutes of break and ask you, please don't drop off. We have a great a couple more things to get through. Unfortunately, Celeste has had a flight delay, but we have a short video to share of hers about the work that they did to localize the SDGs in Hawaii. And then we have a discussion moment so that we can try and bring all of these pieces together. The challenge and the opportunity of the SDGs is how broad they are and how many different things we can focus on. And so I think the rest of the conversation is about how we bring this together, how we move towards action. Jeff, I don't know if you're unmuted because you have a note to say before we break.
Well, when we come back, I'd love Hans Herren to talk about what Millennium Institute is doing, well, on many fronts, but specifically he mentions the gamifying of the SDGs and how that could come into the curriculum. And then I see Medard commenting on World Game 2, which I'd love to learn more about also. So both curriculum issues, but I'd love to hear about that. So are we taking a couple minute break?
Yeah,
Just
we'll
for
take a
next-
5-minute break. We'll come back at 1 minute to the hour, looks like, or on the hour, and we'll get started then. And I think Sonia will play some music. So if you leave your sound on, you'll know when the sound stops to come back. Thank you, everyone. I see we kept most of the people, so thank you for staying on. We've lost a lot of videos, so understandably, and we welcome you to turn your video back on. We are going to turn to the video of Celeste in just a moment, but first I'd like to follow up on the points Jeff just raised, and also just remind you of the Jamboard that we have going on. If I could share it, I would, but I'm having technical difficulty. But I don't know, Sonia, are you able to share the Jamboard quickly and we can talk? Just to let people know, along with, I mean, I think you're using the chat very well, but if you have specific feedback, here's another way to send us, to share your thoughts. You can see Sonia's mouse, and if she clicks on the top, it goes to a couple different slides. So if you want to give targeted feedback or just put post-its wherever, we'll read them all. And we'll share that link again in the chat for you. And the last page of the Jamboard has links you can copy and paste. So with that, I think, Jeff, you had asked Hans to speak next. Hans, are you able to join us?
Yes, I am. I'm actually.
And Hans, by the way, I was in Kinshasa this past week with some of your colleagues working on SDG modeling.
Oh, great. Good.
Yeah, it was really nice.
I see that Steve Arquette is actually also somewhere. I see him listening in today here. Anyway, thanks so much, Jeff, for to allow me to say a few words. Actually, I'm talking from Switzerland right now. I came in a bit late because I had another meeting, so sorry about that. Yeah, so I just mentioned this in the little box there because I thought when Radhika was speaking that, you know, we could have something useful for the curriculum to get people interested in SDGs by playing that SDG Architect board game, which we have developed, which is available actually. I think if you go to Amazon, you can get it there, or write to MI. So I will put the details in the chat box also. It's a board game people can play with, a bit sort of like a Monopoly, or the beer game. Everybody does system dynamics, probably played the beer game or to get introduced to the system thinking. And I think it's a great way to get people interested and understanding the interactions, you know, between different policies, for example, to meet SDGs. The other point I want to make is that on our website, you can also download a version of our ISDG model or integrated SDG model, where you can play all sorts of scenarios. So we have sort of a generic model there, but in the past few years, we have built probably over 40 different models for countries, customized to countries so that they can actually play out real policies for meeting SDGs. So know which way would be the best way, most efficient way to meet the SDGs. And we could help anyone who is interested to use this model for educational purposes with maybe special adaptation, and in particular help them with some information on how to use it best. So we could also give examples of what we have done with the model in some of the countries. And I think it's a great way to get people really involved, because you can then see, you know, if I were to change my agricultural practices, you know, how much gains do I get in the health sector, for example, or in the environment, not only just the zero hunger, for example. So that helps people understand a bit how interaction functions, in particular, how you can get synergies with your actions, your policies, and sometimes also negative feedbacks. So the model will show you the special tools to show you where things move forward in the SDGs, in the 17 goals, or where they move backwards. So now I'm going to put the details in the chat box, and everyone is welcome to write to us, and we'll continue the conversation and support as may be needed.
That's phenomenal. Really, really great tools. I think Radhika had to step off the call. Yeah, so can we make sure that Sonia, if you could connect with Radhika, because this could feed directly into the curriculum work, and it's a huge contribution. Great.
Sure. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for the opportunity. Very appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And Jeff, did you have anything further before we move to Celeste?
Yeah, if Medard Gable could say something about World Game 2.
Yeah, just quickly.
I don't know what it is, so it sounds interesting.
So it came out of the work of Buckminster Fuller, and there was a World Game 1.0. It took place on a giant map, giant meaning the size of a basketball court. And 100 people were put out there in the proportion that they are in the real world. So there were 22 crowded into, China and East Asia, 4 or 5 in North America, and then they were put in charge of the world. So it was a very intense, rapid, 3-4 hour event that people were in charge of the world and had to go solve the problems. The update, because it's very difficult to have a meeting with 100 people in close contact these days, is an online version that's been updated to focus around the Sustainable Development Goals. And so there will be a version that uses a giant map once the world is ready for allowing us to participate in close proximity. But for the time being, it's an online version, and people, participate in ways that allow them to learn a huge amount about the Sustainable Development Goals in a short period of time while having fun.
I think it's incredible. And I have a feeling that our generals and politicians are playing Risk rather than sustainable development, because they seem to want to put their piece on every spot on the globe rather than actually save the world. So I love this idea of a better game and teaching systems this way.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. And the origins came out of, Fuller first called it the World Peace Game. And, his notion was it was a tragic waste of intellect and resources of war games were, and that we needed something that allowed the rest of us, war was too important to be left to the generals and politicians. Let's figure out a way of allowing the energy, vision, values, intelligence of all of us to be focused on the Sustainable Development Goals today, making the world a better place. That's where it comes from.
No, that's so great. And it is driving me crazy, the Ukraine war, which is obviously a disaster and tragic, but also the mindset, well, it's going to go on for quite a while.
Right.
Well, why does it have to go on for quite a while rather than negotiate an outcome that is satisfactory? But the mindset that we should just have wars of attrition that have these massive costs and massive spillovers, and then in the end they'll negotiate something. It makes no sense at all, but that's actually the mindset. So I love the idea of peace games rather than war games. Anyway, we'll take this up. This is great, a great tip. I didn't know about it.
I think also the Canada Network has done some work on gamification of the SDGs, and we're always looking for ways to connect with other networks. So we might follow up with them and try and link all of these pieces together. The US is one of now 48 national networks, at national or regional level networks that SDSN has globally, while we are about 10% of global membership for the networks. So we're going strong and we're continuing to grow. And just, I think that ways that we can connect these initiatives across each other, it's really exciting to just hear all of these ideas.
And that reminds me that if everybody could discuss with their colleagues at other universities that are not SDSN members, to join, to contact Caroline about membership and so forth. We're obviously interested in promoting more members, more networking, more connections. So that's something that I think literally we can all do through our own networks, just to bring more people to the common effort. Could John Anderson say something about the gamification issue?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, absolutely. This is the core of what I'm working with. I'm a professor of what's called virtual technology and design. Medard, it's based off of Mr. Fuller's work 20 years ago of how we gamify this. And so, yeah, you see in my chat here, I spoke to the entire company of Unity, 5,000 employees this last November, and presented the SDG framework. They are very well aware of what's going on. I was very optimistic to hear this. They are looking at the design affordances in particular, working with Esri and other products to start to gamify this, putting these in the hands of the next generation of creators who I teach. And this is actively in our design research labs right now, is to gamify systems thinking. And there's no better game right now than our own worlds in life. And so we are actively building products. I focus largely right now in indigenous communities and having them create their own games and their own stories around this issue. And so I'm very, very interested in it. There's a lot of movement. And like I say, in AWA at the Augmented World Expo, I will be speaking. And yeah, at the moment's moving fast. And this new generation, this is the tool that they use to communicate. And for them to understand complexity in such a way by gamifying is important.
John, that's phenomenal. And if there are ways that I could be helpful to you, or that the network could be helpful on, specific areas of, and I'm sure Hans the same way, what the underlying modeling looks like, or what the some of the substantive issues of getting the job done of decarbonization or energy transformation or other transformations, it would be great. Be very happy to connect, because it's a great. Your world's going to reach a lot more people, and is a very powerful learning methodology. So I would love to give any support to it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeff, and everyone else. Absolutely. I'll report more on this as well.
Great.
Okay, thank you. I'll be in touch too. Yeah.
Just to jump in, and we'll just play Celeste's video now. I'll turn over to Sonia to introduce that. And one additional thought and question is if anyone knows of SDG finance related gamification exercises, because I think there could be some really compelling collaboration between those two ideas, and I'd be interested to know if anyone knows if they're already intersecting. And then with that, I'll turn it back to you, Sonia.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. I have two videos from Celeste's team. The first is just a brief background on the Aloha Plus dashboards, which was their tracking of SDGs locally. So I'll play that first, and then we have recorded remarks from Celeste, who unfortunately, due to delays in travel, is not able to make it. But those will be back to back. So.
Aloha SDSN USA Network members, colleagues, and friends. Greetings from the airport where unfortunately I'm stuck in between flights and thus pre-recording this video for you. Hopefully I'll be able to jump on the call for our Q&A session. But thank you for the invitation to share about Hawaii's experience in implementing the Sustainable Development Goals through our local framework, the Aloha Plus Challenge. I'm happy to share with you my experience, which includes an island perspective, islands being the original circular economy, and a suggestion perhaps that we should all start thinking and acting like islanders on our planet, island Earth, to effectively manage resources through innovative practices grounded in Indigenous knowledge in order to scale impact. Specifically, I'm going to share with you how we need 4 key elements to build back better from the pandemic and its adverse effects on people, planet, and prosperity, and to get on track to deliver the SDGs. And these include political leadership that identifies local priorities, trust-based public-private partnerships that carry these commitments beyond political cycles, and the importance of measuring progress with reliable data that provides transparency and accountability, and ultimately concrete action and solutions. By way of background, the Hawaii Green Growth Network is a public-private partnership with over 150 members from across public and private sector. And these individuals and institutions have committed to stewarding our natural resources, cultural and human resources by advancing economic, social, and environmental goals. Our history is rooted in the 2011 APEC, or Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation meeting in Honolulu that focused on green growth recovery emerging from the 2008 financial crisis. And this commitment to a green growth pathway is more important than ever, as we need an equitable and resilient recovery from COVID. In Hawaii, we have the Aloha Plus Challenge, He Nohona Aioia, a statewide commitment to implement the SDGs through local culture, values, and a legacy of systems thinking. Our 6 priority areas include achieving clean energy, doubling local food, managing our natural resources, investing in smart, sustainable communities, green workforce, and education. The challenge is led by the governor, the 4 county mayors, and supported by public-private partners across organizations and communities. We say progress moves at the pace of trust. So in order to drive action, we need trust-based partnerships and processes, particularly at the local level, that can be scaled to accelerate action. In a sense, excuse me, we need to think local, but act global. And thus the UN launched the 2030 initiative with local 2030 hubs. And there are now 7 designated local 2030 hubs working to scale local and culturally relevant solutions. The Hawaii Local 2030 Hub convenes and connects, identifies shared priorities, tracks progress, and creates shared value. To make progress on our Aloha Plus goals, the Hawaii Local 2030 Hub convenes over 25 stakeholder meetings annually across 3 working groups, measures and policy and legislation and next generation leadership. And we convene the Sustainability Business Forum with over 26 of our publicly held and privately traded companies, and also the Alawai Watershed Collaboration. An Esri-based open data dashboard tracks Hawaii's contribution to all 17 SDGs with 37 targets and 200 community-based indicators, developed over 6 years of convening our partners. The dashboard includes government, business, and community data. This provides transparency and accountability on Hawaii's economic recovery. The data includes things like GHG emissions and clean energy transformation. And our businesses are also tracking their progress on their ESG metrics. The dashboard has been further localized to the county level, which is helping to drive behavior change across our communities. And Hawaii's Measures and Data Working Group continuously updates and improves the dashboard with new data and indicators. And in determining those goals and indicators, they must be actionable, measurable, and practical, and actually reflect host culture values. They reflect the status not just of economic and environmental conditions in Hawaii, but also social justice and quality of life. And these stakeholders played a key role in producing Hawaii's first voluntary local review in 2020, also known as our Benchmark Progress Report. The Benchmark Report provided data to inform action needed and the delta between what we needed to do in order to achieve our 2030 goals, pulling data from the dashboard. This year actually marks the midterm point of Hawaii's Aloha Plus Challenge, and we're thus in the process of developing the midterm review on our collective commitment. And Hawaii's model is now being scaled globally through the Local 2030 Islands Network, which includes island economies in the Caribbean, Pacific, and Europe, from Fiji and Grenada to Ireland and Spain. At the recent COP in Glasgow, the United States committed $9 million to support the Local 2030 Islands Network, to convene communities of practice around island-identified priorities, energy and data for resilience, and regenerative and sustainable tourism. And although islands are on the front lines of climate change, experiencing the already occurring impacts of climate change, they're rapidly innovating around solutions that are at the intersection of the SDGs and thus more able to weigh the trade-offs. These locally driven initiatives can be taken as models for other areas around the world. And we want to acknowledge all of the great work that has come before us, not just in Micronesia and the Caribbean, but also across the United States, with bright spots in New York and LA, Orlando, and other places. So we're really delighted to be working with the SDSN USA network. We want to congratulate the network on its leadership and commitment to the SDGs, and really how we can share models with each other to drive collective action. Thank you so much, and mahalo.
I think we have Valerie and Laura on the line or on the call, not the line, I don't know, on the call from the Hawaii 2030 Hub. And if you have questions that you'd like to relay, please feel free to put them in the chat and we can pass them on. And I just want to say thank you to Celeste. I think we could all hear that she was in the airport filming this for us in her layover, and I'm really just grateful that she was able to put that together last minute so that we could still share some of the experience of what they've learned in Hawaii. It's such an amazing body of work, and to produce a state level VLR, I think that's something that I would be thrilled to see other places take up. So if you convince your state, let us know. But otherwise, just continue posting questions in the chat. And I think we have just a couple of minutes left here. And I'd love to come back to the chairs. I think Dan had to leave, but to you, Helen, Gordon, and Jeff, and ask you to give some final reflections, and if there are any charges that you think we need to take up following this discussion. So Gordon, perhaps I'll turn to you first.
Sure. So I think just taking off from your last comment there, Caroline, I think I'd be really interested in thinking together about how to promote and support VLRs. They could be at state level, they could be at city level or metropolitan levels across the United States. So the city of San Diego, for example, has announced that it's going to start working on a VLR. And I think the network's role could be is how to get those VLRs to be more than just an SDG veneer over existing strategies and actually make them data-driven, evidence-based plans to meet the SDGs. And that means serving up data to them at a level that if it's a city VLR, at a higher spatial resolution than county level data, but actually thinking hard about how to get these strategies to add as much value as possible. And I think for us as a network, nothing organizes us more than a pilot. And if we could identify a city or a state that wanted to do this, that would organize our network around a single common pilot that we're all contributing to and supporting. And that pilot could then be a model that diffuses to places around the country. And I know there's been a lot of interest here. I've spoken bilaterally to Basel, to Mark Roseland. There are lots of people interested in the local data piece and the local VLR piece. So maybe one thing that we could think about together is what's the right pilot for us as a city or a state that we could work on together as a network over the next year.
Fantastic, thank you. Helen, do you have any thoughts to add?
Just very, very quickly, just a reminder, of course, to find out more about our work on June 1st and the Poor People's Campaign in upcoming March. But I'd like to add that I just briefly mentioned a report that SDSN did in the red, the U.S. failure to deliver on a promise of equality. If you look at, in that report, there was a set of indices that were developed that showed that it was such an unequal delivery of SDGs to poor communities, but also vulnerable communities within the US. And I think that's a reason that our working group is so important, because without addressing that unequal delivery, I mean, it's titled in the red because the map is basically in the red. I don't think we have a very good chance of reaching the SDGs in the United States. So come visit us on June the 1st. We'd love your input and your work. It's from 12 to 1:30. And so, and I think if Sonia or someone could drop the link to that report in the chat, that would be great. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, Helen. And we've put the link to that event and the report in the chat. And we will also circulate it after. The chat is so busy, you know, it moves quickly. So we'll be circulating these links after as well. And I'd like to also just now turn back to you, Jeff, and ask for your final thoughts as well.
Well, thank you, Caroline, and thanks to all of you for an amazing session and very inspiring and thought-provoking. I think this discussion fully vindicates the idea of local, regional, state initiatives, and then sharing best practices and scaling up across the country. And we've had many powerful suggestions in the meeting. Caroline and Sonia, with their usual amazing efficiency, will get back to everybody with a summary and a report and all of the connections that have come out. And the chat room by itself is the feed is incredible. So if we can document that and help people to have the connections, that will be wonderful. As you said, Caroline, at the beginning, the three areas where there is very significant shared interest across the network: climate, education, and sustainable cities, I think came out in the discussion repeatedly. These are all areas where there's a lot of work going on, and from many different perspectives, from a justice perspective, a modeling perspective, a design perspective, a gamification perspective, and let's follow up on those areas and on this broadening of our network work. When you come up with proposals for scale up or sharing ideas, we also would like to be helpful to mobilize resources for funding, for grants, and so forth to carry forward the work. So that's another part of, you know, our role as SDSN USA network, is to help finance initiatives that you are bringing forward. So let me mention that as well. But what an amazing gathering. And I want to thank Caroline and Sonia and the whole team, especially for bringing us together and for having such an incredibly fruitful discussion. And also, of course, to thank my co-chairs, Gordon, Dan, and Helen, for the phenomenal work that all of you are doing.
Thank you, Jeff. And we'll certainly follow up on the points raised, share a summary, and also the recording. We'll also pull together the chat so that we can discern the resources listed there and distribute them as well. I'd like to just remind everyone also, we have a coffee chat coming up next month. We're doing monthly networking meetings this year. Again, from the Focal Point survey, we heard from you that you want to hear less of being talked at and more being talking with each other. And today, you know, I'm thankful that so many people were able to speak and share ideas, but I know that there's more that we didn't hear. So please come to next month's coffee chat or get in touch with us separately. There's also the June 13th event, which is a networking event, which will focus on SDG 4, as we've talked about, and that will be another opportunity for everyone to speak to each other. So we'll keep building, we'll keep working together. Please keep your email, keep opening our emails, and I'm just so thankful for all of your time to join us today, and thankful for all that you are doing in your respective organizations to advance this agenda. Have a wonderful weekend.
Be well, everybody. Thank you so much. Fantastic meeting.
Thanks all.